is Godzilla!
It looks like Godzilla, but due to international copyright laws, it's not.
Still, we should run like it is Godzilla!
Though it isn't.
Hello everyone, I'm your host Keith Harris and welcome back to Horror Convos, a casual, relaxing, and occasionally funny podcast where we choose one topic per episode and discuss whatever media related to it that we please. Movies, TV, video games, literature, radio dramas, nothing is off limits. We may go on tangents every now and then, but we always find our way back to where we're going. I often have guests join in the conversation, and we hold regular polls for you to vote on the topics of our Patreon exclusive For the Fans episodes. If advertisements make it that much harder for some random president out there to keep their finger away from the nuclear button when they're drunk, someone please get the word out as soon as possible before World War III finally kicks off that you can listen to the full podcast ad-free on Patreon. Horror Convos is available to listen to on YouTube, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts, so be sure to like, subscribe, and trick that aforementioned intoxicated president into hitting that notification bell instead, so they never miss when our newest content is uploaded, and we can get some of that good old corrupt political clout on our little podcast to continue growing to new heights of content. In other news, before we get started with today's episode, it seems every country's governments have announced in a public service address today that they have unanimously agreed to each retire all of their nuclear arms effective immediately. The first 3 countries to do so being those with the top but largest stockpiles of nuclear weapons, Russia, then the USA, and China. It has been decided that the location for this enormous nuclear dump will be the most uninhabited parts of the Pacific Ocean. Those living within that dumping zone will participate in a mandatory relocation to temporary housing facilities or face summary imprisonment without due process. This worldwide collaborative effort is estimated to be completed at the latest by 2027 in the hopes that by getting these nukes far away from all human populations of noticeable significance, the various giant beasts roaming our planet will be too distracted feeding on that radioactive goodness to bother us any longer. Seems like an airtight plan to me. In the meantime, cities and factories all across our nation alone are warned to expect rolling blackouts as we adopt a new power grid infrastructure completely devoid of reliance on nuclear energy. Sorry to all you Fallout fans, but it looks like your power armor will have to use solar panels. In fact, it seems our country's respective news networks have just received this message from the electric company.
Hey, you guys!
We're fucked!
Thanks very much. You heard it here first, folks. I, for one, welcome our new Kaiju overlords and hope they eat well while we adapt to our new dark ages. Not to worry, however, as long as the internet stays functional, Horror Convos will continue as scheduled, come hell and or high water. Yeah. Did you know that before he broke out into movies, Morgan Freeman's first television role was playing multiple characters on The Electric Company? Yeah, it's true. Look it up. 1971. Easy Reader, Mel Mounds, Count Dracula, Vincent the Vegetable Vampire, etc. It's not that funny, but you learned something. So while you let this potentially inconvenient news sink in, today we will be having a totally not anti-kaiju propaganda discussion about the horrors of giant monster media. And here to help me is my next guest, my brother from another mother and father, and self-proclaimed kaiju superfan. Please welcome to the podcast my stepbrother, Zach. So why don't you start off telling us what kaiju media you grew up on? Because I know, like, Bill told me that you've watched like a shit ton more of this stuff than I have.
Spoiler alert!
Oh yeah, let's talk about this. So
Talk about it.
Oh yeah, so I grew up with Godzilla. I mean, that's what I stuck with pretty much throughout my whole entire childhood, was Godzilla, and then the original King Kong. I watched a little bit of that, and even a little bit of Ultraman, if you know who Ultraman is.
Oh, yeah, I know. I didn't watch much of him, but I was aware of him.
Yeah. Another one that I was pretty interested in was Gamera. Gamera is similar to Godzilla, kind of turtle, protects kids. That was his main job.
Yeah,
in
I know
series.
that one.
So, yeah, I know plenty about kaiju, man.
And nice. Hey, so what was as far back as you can remember, what was the first kaiju film you saw that really resonated with you, or got you into the franchise? Like, oh, I got to see more of this.
Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla. That was the first movie I ever seen.
Oh fuck yeah, I love that one.
Yep, the original Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla. So that really got me into it, got me interested into watching the Godzilla films, and then just from there, head on, I loved it. I actually kind of flip-flopped between all the movies in that series. So
Nice.
I started from Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla, and I swear I went from there to the original Godzilla, King of the Monsters from 1954. And then from there, I kind of branched out, just trying to explore, see what other kaiju there were. I watched King Kong Lives, if you're familiar with that. It was kind of like a sequel, down the road from the original King Kong.
I've seen pieces of, like, I've seen bits and pieces of quite a few of these things like nowhere near as much as you have. I saw pieces of the original King Kong from a shit. When was the original? It was 1933, I think. Yeah. But I remember by the time I was real little, I don't remember exactly what age, maybe 5 or 6. Like very early on, I had seen like at least the clips of him climbing the Empire State Building with the planes going after him or whatever building he was on, and that was kind of my introduction to the concept of stop motion and a bit puppeteering. Because I remember when I first saw it, like as a little kid, I was mesmerized. But like, how did they get? How the hell did they get that gorilla to do all that stuff? Like my mind hadn't learned how to process between living and non-living things in a television and movies yet. But I don't know whether I saw Godzilla or King Kong first. It might have been King Kong, but then I saw a little of the 1970s King Kong, the remake with Jessica Lange. I think like so many people were introduced to her from American Horror Story. I think from like Gen Z onward, most people know her from that. I had seen her in a few things growing up, but I imagine a lot of 70s kids probably grew up with her making their balls drop in King Kong. I mean, it's just there was always a bit more of a sexualization to the King Kong films. I felt, at least the ones where he fell for a human. And then I saw the Peter Jackson's 2005 remake with Jack Black. So many people for one reason or another hated that version. I actually think it's one of the best iterations of the story.
Yes.
Even though it was way too long, they could have cut so much of it out. But as far as Godzilla goes, I have seen pieces of the 1954 original. I saw King Kong versus Godzilla, 1962, King Kong 76. The first kaiju-related thing I watched regularly was Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. It was just for the Zord fights towards the end of every episode where, technically it's not purely kaiju, I guess. It's like a mix of mecha and kaiju. Like the Zords would be the mecha and the bad guys would be the kaiju. Once they always, for whatever reason, it's like they do the same formula every episode and like every other iteration of Power Rangers I've seen, where it's always like a Dark Souls boss battle. You got the first phase. Where they have to kill like almost every frickin' bad guy twice. It's like he's little, then he's giant, and that's when it almost gets to a point where you're just like, why the fuck don't you guys get into your Zords right away and just like skip ahead, encourage the bad guy to go straight to his final form so you can just kill him outright. Like you do this every other week with like 100 different creatures. It's like, how in the hell do you not understand how these things operate by now, that you put all this effort into like killing him the first time when he's like human sized? He's gonna come back. Your most powerful shit is always with your Zords, or that's where you got your super weapons, whatever. I just, from an out of universe standpoint, I understood that was for episode padding, and even in the original Japanese Super Sentai series that all the Power Rangers series are based off of, that's where they get historically most of their fight footage from. I mean, like literally Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, every fight scene pretty much was the Japanese footage, and then they switched it back to American footage for all the scenes where their helmets were off, and I think they even found an American actress who looked like the original Japanese actress for Rita Repulsa. So if you pay close attention, you can tell when it's the Japanese Rita versus the American Rita. It was I think that was my first exposure to like English dubbing over Japanese footage as well. Before I got into anime, which was a whole different can of worms as far as lip syncing. But yeah, that was the first kaiju related thing that I followed like religiously. I mean, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, that like holy shit, that was my jam growing up. Yeah, I'll tell you all the stories sometime about the Red Ranger who came to my 5th or 6th birthday party, and he turned out to have a much more adult occupation on the side when he wasn't mainlighting birthday parties as the Power Ranger. You're gonna have to go to Patreon to hear that story. So have you seen Godzilla versus Megaguirus? The G Annihilation strategy. This came out in 2000. If I'm pronouncing it correctly.
That's one that you have seen that I haven't. That was part of the Final War series, and I mean I know about Megaguirus, but I'm not too familiar about Megaguirus. I know he's similar to Mechagodzilla. He's a robot that's actually I think built by the same team that built Mechagodzilla, the aliens, but I'm not too certain about that. That's one that I'm not, I'm kind of foggy about.
I don't remember hardly any of it. I mean, I bring it up because I remembered one scene from it, and I think I only saw this one scene, and then I ended up turning it off, or I changed the channel to something else I was looking to watch that was coming on around the same time. Maybe I was just channel flipping that day. But I remembered this one scene where I don't know if Megaguirus is robotic or if he was an insect. It's like in this scene, he's one of those creatures that evolves in different stages. Like I think he starts off as like an insect-like nymph, and then he molts into like this dragonfly thing. I think his theme, like every creature has a real world theme around them. Well, most of like at least the classical kaiju I think were based off of real animals and insects. They said you got Mothra, and I think Rodan was like based off a pterodactyl or pterodon, whatever they call them now. Jurassic Park was my first education on dinosaurs, okay? Jurassic Park and The Land Before Time and the kaiju stuff, like those three things kind of first shaped my perception of, what you call shit. This was back when Brontosaurus was still what we called the long necks, but before we found out that apparently someone fucked up the exhibits and Brontosaurus was never a thing. It's like people have been, having to rethink their shit on like what we thought we knew about dinosaurs, like every other fucking generation. And they got out. How many documentaries did we grow up watching on them that like every year, every 5 years? Oh yeah, turns out that was bullshit, or that was actually this, or this actually had feathers, and it's like fuck. But it's like I can't keep getting retested on this crap, man. And again, it's like the older I get, the more I find out I was taught incorrectly in school. But back to my point on Megaguirus, this one scene I remember was this woman and a man. I think they were a couple, maybe they were work friends or something. They're walking through this city alleyway at night, and I think the guy was getting off his shift from work, and the lady asks him, in this super obvious, like, British English dubbed accent. Like, that's one funny thing you realize watching the dubs as an adult is how, like, so many of the accents they choose is, like, right away they're not Japanese, but at least with some English dubs, they at least choose actors who can either do an Asian accent or maybe they were Asian American. But these older ones, it's like, they'll use actors from Great Britain. Some of them sound like, fucking Australian. It's like some of them they didn't even try. Or you can tell this was a different time in terms of their availability to get the dub actors. But she asks him, like, do you want a coffee or something? He's sitting down in the alley. She walks off, and then Megaguirus comes in, and he, like I said, he's like an insectoid nymph at this point, like a dragonfly nymph. Just he's only a little bit bigger than a human size, and he comes out of the alleyway like a slasher villain, kills the guy, just like mauls him, and of course they don't show a lot of blood and stuff. I mean, I never saw a lot of blood with the Godzilla movies when it came to human violence, and I don't know if they were never meant to be marketed that to such an adult rating, or if they just didn't have the budget, if they put all the budget into creature effects. But the lady comes back, her boyfriend's gone, then this thing comes out, grabs her, and it was like it's like super quick, but it was a really violent scene in terms of the intensity of it. Like I said, you don't see much, but it's like this thing grabs her, she's screaming, and it yanks her right out of her shoes, and drags her, like, kicking and screaming behind this little gateway or panning in the alley, or is it something off screen? And then you see the creature come back out. It goes into its molting stage, and that's when you first get what I guess would become Megaguirus' main look, where, like, he first starts expanding the wings with, like, this super obvious CGI, like 2000 CGI. And yeah, that was the first time a kaiju film, like, legitimately scared me, because for like 99% of them, I thought, I mean, even as a little kid, I picked up pretty quickly, it's just people in suits, or the basic miniatures, or some animatronics. But it's very rarely did it really, did the creatures really intimidate me. I loved the creativity and ingenuity that went into their concepts, and the ingenuity that went into the older effects, especially in the 50s and 60s. Yeah, aside from that, I mean, we'll get into my kaiju influence in the 90s onward and in a few minutes, but yeah, that was about it for me. So what was your favorite media that you grew up on, as far as, like, what I know there are multiple series of like the Godzilla films, or multiple continuities. Have you seen any of the recent ones, like from the 2014 film onward?
The legendary ones. Oh yeah, I've seen all three.
And then okay, I only saw 2014's Godzilla and King of the Monsters, and I watched, like, clips of Godzilla versus Kong, just like the fight scenes on YouTube. So I'm not nearly as familiar with that one, and I never saw Kong Skull Island, and that was 2017, I believe. So as far as, like, the different eras of kaiju media, which would you say is your favorite, or which had the strongest run?
Well, I think the strongest run is actually tied between the Showa, which is what I grew up on, the 60s and 70s Godzilla series, and then I like what Legendary is doing now with Godzilla. I mean, it's more of, like, it makes people today more interested in Godzilla. Instead of people running around in suits, it's all animated, it's all, done by computer, and it looks so much better. It draws more attention, from people to watch these movies. So with what Legendary did, they made Godzilla into just a super powerhouse monster. He's not just, this goofy guy in a suit walking around, trying to please kids. This guy's out to, wreck your day. And he's...
Right.
I mean, if you saw what happened in King of the Monsters, I mean, at the end, he obliterates King Ghidorah. And King Ghidorah, I mean, it was a great story throughout the whole movie.
Right.
Everything lined up, great movie. The Godzilla versus Kong one, the latest in that trilogy, very good. I liked it for the most part, but it wasn't enough of, Godzilla versus King Kong, and it kind of threw me off with, having Mechagodzilla in there in that movie. And I understand why they brought it in there, because of they used the remains from King Ghidorah to bring Mechagodzilla to life and try to seek revenge on Godzilla for pretty much whooping his ass in the previous movie.
Yeah. I think they didn't they have like one of Ghidorah's heads or brains or something left over, and they like basically do a digital a fingerprint of his consciousness, and they insert it into the AI version that was going to be like the mainframe for Mechagodzilla, and then Ghidorah's influence took over, and that's when he went bad.
Yep.
Yeah. Big shock that didn't work out. Who could have predicted this? It's not like that's the plot of like every other fucking AI gone wrong story done since like we copied this alien in that mind frame or whatever the fuck it is, like that's literally the plot of Avengers Age of Ultron. Like they copied this AI, or they based the AI off of some set of neurons or a digital blueprint in Loki's scepter or something, and then Tony and Bruce Banner, they use that as the basis for Ultron, and it like so many people misunderstand that movie. Like I hate when they say, hey, Tony created Ultron. Well, hate's a strong word. It annoys me, because I mean in the comics technically, there was a lot more that was done in terms of creating the AI for Ultron, and I don't think Loki's scepter or anything was involved in that. In the movie, like, realistically, if Tony hadn't studied the scepter, the government would have. And sooner or later, I think someone was bound to stumble upon that. Like, Tony's not the only genius-level intellect in the Marvel Universe. So it's like, I don't 100% blame him for it. It's less that he and Bruce created Ultron, and more that it was still his fault, but it's he kind of just took the building blocks that were already there and just kind of ran with it without understanding what he was really playing with. But coming back to my point, it's like, it's still messing with shit that you don't understand, and then it seems like just a constant theme of like arrogance on humanity's part, trying to take this shit that you don't know exactly what it is and trying to make it work for you. Same shit they did with Jurassic Park. Never stop to think if they should, because you're so preoccupied with whether you could. And I'm just like, that seems to be a running theme throughout these kaiju movies as well. It's just humanity paying for its arrogance, whether it's Godzilla being a result of nuclear testing, or in some versions of the lore, it's like the nukes didn't technically create him, they just kind of woke him up and they serve as his fuel. I mean now they're doing this whole, like, I don't know if, again, like, you're much more versed in the kaiju lore than I am now with the Legendary series, what you call the newest ones. And I don't know how much of those is literally just remaking plot lines that were done in the older films versus which stuff is like all new lore. But now they got these like titans that all come from this hollow earth, like Jules Verne, or looking underworld, and I think it's implied that like that's where Kong's ancestors grew up, and there was this enormous kaiju war like before humanity came along, I think. And it's just they've made the lore so much more complex now, at least compared to the kaiju media that I was familiar with, where now it's like there's this whole backstory. It's almost like I kind of want to see a movie about this kaiju war now. It's like with the Transformers movies, like I would love to see a War for Cybertron movie, and we've only ever gotten bits and pieces of it, like even in the newest ones. And it's just like, did they always put this much thought into the kaiju characters? Because I kind of thought, like when I was growing up, I always saw it as like, you got Godzilla, you got Kong, like a couple to a few of the main monsters, and their backstories were very simple. And then the rest of it was just like, monster of the week, like this new guy comes in for one movie, then he's killed off. And I don't remember them always having these rich backstories behind them. Did they always have that?
No, you're actually on something, because when I was watching, the earlier films of Godzilla, there was really no, backstory to it. It's pretty much, just, hey, Godzilla fights, some random monster, some random kaiju.
The giant condom.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's just, it was just these goofy, B-rate movies, that were made, and it was just fun to watch. It was kind of like those kind of movies you can just turn off your brain, just watch them, enjoy them, just for the heck of it, But that's what I love about the legendary movies now, is they're actually putting this awesome storyline and background story into these movies, and now it's kind of filling in, why are they fighting each other, why is this going on. So that's why now I'm kind of paying more attention to the legendary Godzilla films as opposed to the Showa and Heisei from back in the day.
I definitely think there's a discourse to be had over how much of that is necessary for the franchise to really succeed in modern day, at least. Seems to me, of course, like, the franchise's history already shows you didn't need that back then. And I do like a lot of the ideas they're doing with trying to, add more depth to the creatures, but at the same time, I can't help wondering, how much of this did they come up with because they genuinely thought it would benefit the lore of the monsters themselves, versus how much of that did they do just because they needed some way to pad out the runtime or add more stuff for the humans to do. From what I've seen, they do give... From what little I remember about the original series, he said we'll get more in depth on this. I don't remember the humans having that much to do in the older films. Like, they were literally like 80% of the time just like fodder for the monsters or like spectators. As with these newer films, it feels like from the 90s onward, it feels like they tried to give the humans more maybe more agency. Yeah, I was struggling to find the right word for a second. I mean, they always had some agency to an extent, but for the most part, like I said, they were just kind of caught in the middle. Well, which even in the new films, they still are. They're to a point, but now it's like with King of the Monsters, you had that big moment towards the end where the Millie Bobby Brown's character's dad. It was I think someone else in like that military base where they'd spent 2/3 of the film like kind of watching what was going on or trying to follow the monsters around the world, and one of them's like, it's like Serizawa said, let him fight, and then the main guy who's like, I've seen this guy in like so many movies. I know I'll think of his name later. He's one of those like character actors that you just. He's not Luke Wilson. I know this guy. I've seen him, and he's one of those character actors who's done like so many movies.
Kyle Chandler. Got a little research next time.
But he turns to like the other guy or like to the camera or something in this big like blatant movie moment, and he says like, no, this time we join the fight, and you have like that big like let's get it on moment where like Godzilla roars, and like then you have those jets coming in from behind him. It looks like what you see at the football games, or like the jets go ahead with like the streams, and it like all you needed was like these jet streams to be in different colors. So like do the rainbow, like Godzilla is for Pride Month. It's like there could have been this whole underlying context throughout the movie of like Ghidorah just, I don't know, somehow symbolizing homophobia, and it turns out Godzilla was like the theme of this movie was being an ally, and it's like he destroys you thought he was powered by some kind of nuclear bomb, and then this whole rainbow effect comes out to like, I'm powered by the gay.
Equality!
And you have all these different humans like cheering Godzilla on, and they're like from all across the LGBTQ plus spectrum. You see it like cheering, holding up their signs as he goes back into the water. It's like then you'd have a bunch of political people on the media, like they would do this shit today if they had the chance to. Just like every media, they get a chance to increase diversity marketing and of course I'm not against diversity, obviously, when it's done well, but there's so much of it worked into movies and series these days that just feels so blatantly artificial. It just comes off so pretentious and kind of and by the numbers at a certain point. But it's just, I did start to notice as the movies went on, like they always had kind of a commentary to them. I mean, the original Godzilla was like that was a product of the Cold War or post World War II era, I believe, where you had the nuclear scare still going on, and this was like an example. Godzilla was essentially like a living embodiment of like nature's response to the atomic bomb, or maybe he was the atomic bomb personified. Like, what if this great destructive power turned on us and we weren't able to combat it? Because like once the atomic bomb was invented, I mean you talk to you know veterans. I come from a military family, and now you got Oppenheimer having just come out with Cillian Murphy. I mean, people thought the world was gonna end for like so many years after the atomic bomb was invented, because it's like it was such a drastic jump in destructive power from anything that far and away from anything humanity had invented prior. And it's just the human race had gained the power to destroy itself. And I guess even with these Monster of the Week movies where it's like, see that banana peel? Oh, irradiated. Now it's giant. It's become sentient somehow. And Godzilla comes in, kills it. Nobody fucks around on his turf. This is my territory. And he goes to lick his wounds back into the ocean. I guess the salt water is what it takes to activate his healing factor, or whatever the fuck. Because somehow he comes back in every movie, like either unscathed or maybe he's got some scars left over. But yeah, as it goes on, you definitely get more of a commentary, I think, in terms of real world issues. And yeah, but I think they were always at their best when they kind of kept it relatively simple. They like never tried to make it too political or too on the nose. Even when they started getting into commentaries about climate change and such. What do you remember as far as any of the older movies had some like larger commentary behind them?
Not really. I mean, the older movies really, they were just based off some kind of alien invasion kind of team coming in, controlling these monsters, to go fight Godzilla, because their whole plot in each and every of the older movies was, hey, we're going to take control of one of these monsters in order to fight Godzilla, and then take over Japan, and then after Japan, the entire world. That was why I kind of, started getting away from those older movies, too, because there was just no real good story to it. It was just the same thing. It was kind of like the same movie you're watching over and over again, except for different kaiju that Godzilla's fighting. With the legendary, and as you saw kind of like in the 90s, like you were talking about, they get into, the kind of politics, kind of, real world issues, why, Godzilla needs to die, why, this kaiju needs to die. And that's why I kind of started watching those newer movies. It's just so much more, in depth. They go deeper and deeper into why, they need to fight Godzilla.
And God, how much of a why do you need? Because he's a big-ass lizard who keeps wrecking the same building that these blue-collar workers bust their asses every fucking year to try and repair it. It just keeps... Dude, the blue-collar workforce would be the most anti-Godzilla party out there, I think. Like, out of all the various human factions you could think of having their big discourse around, is he our friend? Or should we maybe, like, build these giant ramps in the city, or just like designate a whole area of the city, like this is a kaiju area. They just let them walk through. Kind of have some like lights, like you see on an airport runway. Like go here, fight here, and it's like these dumb fucking animals are just not going. They're just like fuck civilization. We don't give a shit. They're gigantic, superpowered toddlers. That are just these wild beasts, and they go back and forth on like how intelligent these things are. Like in some versions, they imply that Godzilla is really intelligent. Maybe he's instinctively more in touch with the Earth than humans. Maybe some of these creatures, I think they imply they're smarter than humans. It depends on like their theme. The more robotic ones, I think, are generally implied to have some greater intelligence beyond just, see Godzilla, kill thing, and you get into, like, them, like, Mechagodzilla. I think at one point, and even in the older movies, I think he gains access to, like, military databases, or he gains the ability to, like, hack into stuff that, and like, threatens to launch nuclear missiles or something. I forget what. I think there was a kaiju that could do that. If it's not Mechagodzilla, then I don't know which. Yeah, but how many times or how many of these movies have taken place in Tokyo? Because I guess that's the only place they could afford to shoot these things for so long. And you're just like, imagine. And it's like, you remember that Family Guy skit where Peter's, like, trying to just destroy James Woods' career, just be as offensive as possible? Well, and he goes on David Letterman, I think, and talks about how it's like James Woods steals his identity, so he starts using James's identity, and he goes on there, talks about what James Woods' next movie is going to be. Like, this is dark. Fair warning, listeners.
I play a window washer who has just finished washing the last window at a World Trade Center. And then I turn around to get off the scaffold, and what do you think I see coming? A plane. And I go, come on!
And yeah, I'm just imagining, like, what if instead of 9/11, it was a kaiju that kept coming in to wreck the building, and the guy just finishes putting the shit up, and it's like, come on! My God, like, why have I not just moved already? This is, like, worse than living in Gotham City every fucking year. We gotta repair the roads. We gotta find my daughter a new school. Well, I like, how much money is being spent on these people just to like, get their lives back together? And this shit could happen again. Like, dude, Tokyo would be absolutely abandoned, like, at most, after 2, maybe 3 kaiju attacks at most.
Fuck this shit, I'm out.
How do you manage to keep this premise going for, like, 16 fucking movies? Even when it goes into, like, other cities, I was glad they started, expanding it beyond that, and into other countries. But at a certain point, it's like, where on earth can you live to like, even have a tenable quality of life when this shit is happening, like, every year, every few years? It's like the natural disaster that never ends. Like, how are there not people committing mass suicides in the streets to just, like, fuck this, I don't want to live on this planet anymore? Or let's start building spaceships, like, Noah, get the boat, build these space arcs, get us the fuck out of here. We'll colonize Mars if we have to. Oh no, wait, can't do that, because apparently some of these kaiju are from fucking space now. It just you can't win with this. There's one thing about this universe, man, is just it sucks to be a human in any version of the kaiju verse, because just there's no peace with this shit.
Just don't think about it.
It's like, seriously, like of all the cities you've seen get attacked, like, name one major city on Earth that hasn't been royally fucked in at least one movie with these creatures.
I can't even think of one.
Like Japan, America. Oh yeah, I forgot. Those are the only 2 countries that exist. The only thing anything interesting happens in. It's like, I imagine, like, again, I haven't seen a lot of the movies, but I imagine, like, as long as this franchise is going on, pretty much every major city or even country, like, if it has an iconic landmark in it, chances are anywhere on Earth that has this shit, Godzilla's either stomped it, or one of the other creatures have stomped it. Like, if anywhere, or maybe it's like how lightning is attracted to tall objects. Maybe the problem is we just need to make our buildings smaller. Like, if we just make our cities less tantalizing, less shiny, and just go back to little villages in huts and tents. It's like how our ancestors did it. Yeah, maybe these things will just lose interest and like at least keep their fights more regulated to the mountains or the oceans or wherever. For me, the first film in the franchise that really made me fall in love with the Godzilla concept, and I know this will be a controversial choice for all you hardcore kaiju fans out there. For me, it was 1998's American Godzilla. That is one of my favorite guilty pleasure films, and I hesitate to even call it a guilty pleasure. Like, I've listened to like opinions across the aisle about it, and as I've gotten to know the passion of the kaiju fan base and looked more back on the older Godzilla films, I understand more where the people who like passionately hated it are coming from. I would argue, however, even if it's not a good Godzilla film, in my opinion, it is a very decent, like at minimum, decent quality kaiju film. Because to me, in terms of what makes a kaiju film, there's nothing about it that really doesn't fit the mold for it, or doesn't at least make a competent execution on it. Because like I remember, before this film officially came out, I vaguely remember the marketing from it. I rewatched some of the old trailers for it for the podcast, and this film had some stellar marketing, like that trailer of people looking at a T-Rex skeleton in a museum, and then Godzilla's foot like stomps on it, and the foot alone is apparently like bigger than the T-Rex. I don't know if that's actually how big he is in the film. I couldn't tell you the scale comparisons, but I can remember they did a great job marketing this movie, in that, as far as I remember, again, I rewatched some of the old trailers, they don't show you what he's going to look like exactly. I think they only show the foot, the tail, the eye, and they show a bit from the actual movie of when that fisherman is on the dock, and then the huge swell comes, and at first you think it's a wave, then the spikes come up out of the water. And you're like, oh no, that's something under the water. And I remember being excited for this movie when it came out. I think my dad and I went to see it in theaters. I was born in 1991, so I would have been like 7 at the time, I believe. This was a hardcore film for someone to see at my age. Like I've said before, my parents let me watch so much stuff that I was maybe too young for at the time. But I will agree the CGI has definitely shown its age in some shots, like especially when it holds on the creature for too long. But much like with Jurassic Park in '93, which still looks fantastic by today's standards, specifically regarding the T-Rex, I think they were smart to have it rain so much of the time in New York throughout this Godzilla film, because the rain really helps mask the CGI. They keep it from being too obvious, especially in the darker scenes where like you don't see all of him in pure broad daylight detail. No, there's usually enough of him obscured, and they don't usually hold him on the screen for too long, to where it's like you start noticing all the imperfections more easily. There's a real gray area there with 90s CGI, because the whole 90s as a decade was where people were really experimenting. Everyone was trying to really push the boundaries of digital effects, and even the original Jurassic Park has shown its age in some areas, like the broad daylight shots of the Apatosaurus, whatever it's called, and the raptors. There's those things they're running through the fields with, Sam Neill and the kids, those little skinny herbivore dinosaurs. There's, in those moments, yes, the CGI is obvious there too. But I've said before, we're so spoiled on special effects these days that I don't think we appreciate all that goes into those older ones as much, because we're so quick to point out how obvious it is that it's animated. I will say, from a practical effects standpoint, 98's Godzilla does not get enough love when it comes to that, because you watch the behind-the-scenes footage for this stuff, they built full-size, maybe not skyscraper size like the digital version, in the digital shots, but they built a large-size Godzilla, like a upper torso for some of the close-up shots, like when they're in his mouth in like the taxi and he's crunching down on the car and stuff, like that was a full animatronic mouth they were sitting in, and with like the teeth bearing down and everything, and some of the shots where he's staring at Matthew Broderick, and it's like I look at some of these machines. And I'm just thinking to myself, oh my god, how much fun must this movie have been to make once they actually got rolling on production, and you're seeing all this shit that they built for it.
I want to rip this movie a new one.
And here, go for it.
So, because I'm a big-time Godzilla fan, you know, I just, when I first saw this in theaters, around the same time Keith did, it was right when it first came out. I was about 4 years old, just turned 4, and I already knew all about Godzilla at this point. When I first saw this thing, I wanted to puke. I looked at how Godzilla was designed, how, you know, weak it was compared to the normal Godzilla. And I looked at it, and I think I remember at the end of the movie, it died literally getting trapped on a bridge.
Yeah, was it the Brooklyn Bridge or the Golden Gate?
I think it was the Brooklyn Bridge.
Yeah, I always forget the different bridges in New York. Yeah, he gets trapped in the cables, and like they sideswipe him a couple times with the missiles.
Yeah, that is just not how Godzilla is supposed to die. This little Zilla creature, whatever it is. Oh my gosh, when they had him in Final Wars, I was so glad Godzilla just hit him with his tail and he went flying and died. That is as much respect as this Godzilla deserves. I mean, it's just not fair to us hardcore Godzilla fans to have to sit there and watch, I think it was like an hour and a half to 2 hours of this movie just going, you know, what is this that we're looking at? I mean, is this an overgrown, like, Komodo dragon, or what is it that we're watching attack, you know, New York City? But, I mean, if you're looking at it from, like, an independent film, if they just never put it as Godzilla, beautiful film. If they just said Zilla, you know, it would have been, you know, I would have had a lot more respect for it. But because they had to tarnish Godzilla's name and put it with this quarter size, I don't even know what to call it, just overgrown lizard looking thing. Just, to me, it just wasn't good enough. It should have never been called Godzilla. It's a good movie on its own, like I said, but other than that, it's just, to me, it's just straight garbage.
That's fair. I can mostly agree with that. Like I do think the film probably would have been more successful if they hadn't like banked on Godzilla's brand recognition, because at that time, even back then, I don't know how popular Godzilla was in the States. I think his primary audience from up until maybe the 2000s at least was always more in Japan. I mean, to this day, that probably is still the majority who watch it. But as far as I know, like, Godzilla didn't really have much of an American viewership, at least in comparison to Japan, until after. Or like the 98 film, I think it had two effects. One, it introduced people to the monster, or at least the premise of not just Godzilla, but Kaiju as a whole, in a way that was more palatable for American audiences. This is very much a Hollywood movie. It is not a Toho Godzilla type film by any means. Or means that, like, even compared to like Ultraman, Gamera, and any films of that culture that are known for having that specific feel or style in Japan. And Roland Emmerich basically did none of that. Because if I remember right, he wasn't even a Godzilla fan. Almost no one involved with this film in terms of who actually made the decisions, creatively speaking, had much of a connection to the original franchise. And you could argue that maybe in some cases, with certain adaptations of big franchises, it's better for it not to be helmed by at least not a hardcore fan, because you're never going to please all the hardcore fans to begin with. That's not the goal, or at least it shouldn't be, because it's just an impossible fight. But additionally, there can be a bit of bias that comes in from how much you love the original, that when you're trying to reintroduce it to a new audience and you have to keep the general audience in mind to a point, you might not always make the best decisions creatively on, okay, how do we introduce this concept to people? How much reference do we have, or homages do we have to the original lore? And versus how do we help this kind of stand on its own as like a sort of new gateway? Yeah, it's very much the same problem that the new Star Wars films had, like from the prequels onward, I would say, is that Lucas tried to make it easier for, I guess, for families to get into, who, specifically kids. And at the same time, you're trying to keep the spirit of Star Wars alive to where it feels like Star Wars. That's the most common criticism I hear about the prequels and, to an extent, the sequels, is that it just didn't feel like the original trilogy. So then you look at this take on Godzilla, and it's like, I remember I've watched the making of stuff as far as how the script went into development, and at early in development, I believe they were going to make it look much closer to the original films and the original design. And then I don't remember off the top of my head exactly where the design for the Zilla creature came in. And I think that was from that idea was, or that general direction was born out of a desire to make Godzilla more mobile. Because you notice in the older films, at least from what I've seen, he's very slow. He's not very agile. He's very much built more like a tank.
Yeah.
In the original series, and that works for that series. It's very imposing. He's this larger than life behemoth of a thing that you can like fire everything at, and it's like nothing can touch him almost, because he's just so tough against conventional weaponry. So I understand why fans didn't like that element essentially being scrapped for this new version. But at the same time, like I personally liked the Zilla design because it looked, I liked that it looked more lizard-like as opposed to just looking like basically a 3 times supersized T-Rex with Stegosaurus spikes on its back. Because to me, he looked more dangerous, like not just in terms of his size, but in terms of how he would move. I liked the look of the claws and how he had more of a you said more of a Komodo dragon aesthetic. Yeah, and he looked like something that could move around and the military would have a hard time keeping up with. Because like a lot of those older films, again, they go back to, you have these lines and lines of tanks just, gathering in a single area, and they just throw everything at him, and it's like he just shrugs it off and then obliterates them with his nuclear breath, whatever. And I understand the appeal of that, to how you're just throwing everything you got at this thing and it's just never enough. But I also liked the appeal of, in this version, like, they have such a hard time hitting him, and to me that adds a more interesting layer to the conflict of, like, hey, good God, not only are we having a hard time figuring out something strong enough to kill this thing, but we're also, having a hard time just getting a lock on him, because, his body heat is so low. I think they say that he's colder than the buildings around him. That I thought was an interesting detail, because it makes it so you can't just abuse the crap out of heat-seeking stuff that you throw at him. You have to actually keep him still. That's one aspect of the conflict that I liked, is they're trying to figure out how to keep him in one place long enough just to, target him. And because so much of the ammunition they throw at him, they make a point of, and I thought this was a smart choice, they make it so it's not just Godzilla destroying the city, but the humans themselves are causing collateral damage, a lot of friendly fire, just, trying to hit him. And to me, that adds to the urgency of just how dangerous this thing is, because it's like if you miss one wrong shot, then you take the whole Chrysler building down. And I love when the mayor gets so pissed off at the army, you've caused more damage than that goddamn thing did. And I'm just thinking to myself that, like, yeah, that's got to be frustrating. I mean, we see that in war movies all the time, where it's like, you have the military trying to hit whatever they're aiming at, and you get these intense dramatic scenes in the control room of like a negative hit, target's going this way, or he's gone underground, he's gone airborne, and it's like you got all these jets, tanks, everything just trying to coordinate around this thing, and it's just so unlike anything they've ever faced before that it poses an interesting question. And to me, it looked a little bit more believable as to, like, thinking to myself, how would the military coordinate itself against a giant monster attack? Like, especially one that can move around so well and it's flexible enough to go underground whenever he wants. That aspect I really loved, how he uses the underground sewer systems and then the surrounding water around the island of Manhattan, and to move around. They really add multiple layers to how he takes advantage of the environment that he's in, as opposed to him just, most of the time, in my experience, the basic Godzilla formula is he comes out of the water, they try to fight him in the water, he completely just butt fucks everyone in the water, he's in his element. He comes onto land, you at least have a shot to try to fight him, but he's so tough that, again, almost nothing can touch him. And then, by the end of the film, he goes back into the water to lick his wounds. So the question becomes, it's one thing to have a movie where you got two monsters fighting each other and the monster does most of the damage to him, but what if you didn't have another monster in the equation and the humans had to strictly rely on themselves, more like I think in the original, because I don't think they started introducing enemy monsters for him to fight until it got more into the sequels. Wasn't it like the first couple films or so, it was just them dealing with him?
So right after the original in 1954, the second Godzilla movie was Godzilla Raids Again, and that's when they introduced Anguirus. So in 1956, they started adding on more and more monsters to see how it would go. First they had, Godzilla and Anguirus. After that it was, I think, Godzilla and Rodan, and then they just kept building on more and more Kaiju throughout the series. But, yeah.
I'm not sure. Again, like I like the original design. I love the whole overpowering this thing just towers over all of you. Who he's like a god. He earns his name. It's a very similar appeal to King Kong. But I think what happened was with this American version, they tried to create a version of Godzilla who would have the type of agility and mobility of King Kong, because he was always much more agile than Godzilla. He could climb much more easily. I don't think he was as big originally until the first time they did Godzilla versus King Kong in 62. Like, I think even in that one they portrayed how at the end of the day it's two people in suits kind of lumbering and going at each other, just like rock'em sock'em. But even in that movie, I think they portrayed how Kong could move a little bit more than he could. Godzilla's biggest weakness in the originals, to me, is how big he is, because the sheer size makes him such a big target that unless he has enough room to move around, it's like once he gets in close and starts boxing with the enemy monsters, it becomes almost more of a war of endurance, like, who can overpower the other faster, or how much punishment can he take before he gets back up again. He's more like Rocky in those older films, where he has to rely more on his toughness than his physicality, whereas this American version flips that dynamic, where he is capable of being killed by human weaponry, and if you can just get a direct hit on him. But again, it's a matter of immobilizing him long enough to strategize against him, and that's why I really liked how they solve that sort of puzzle. There's a bit of a puzzle dynamic to how they try to combat him. At first with luring him out into the open with all those fish, that I thought was really smart. I loved that effect of just all those fish they piled together. I forget if that was all real fish or fake or whatever, but I loved that idea of trying to feed him, because he's an animal. So you work with him like you would any other kind of predator. Just trying to think about how would a lizard actually behave even on this scale. Well, because I think in this version he doesn't know how big he is. Like he's mutated by radiation still, but he behaves pretty much how an iguana, Komodo dragon, whatever he was mutated from in this version would act for the most part. He's very much out of his element. The original Godzilla acts more like, even in the original, I think he acts more like he's new to interacting with humans and human civilization, but this is still very much his turf. Like, he's so old and he's lived on this planet so much longer than humans have, that it's like, to him this is all just more kind of familiar to him. Whereas with Zilla, we'll call him Zilla, he's the first of his kind, and he's almost like a giant baby in some ways, where he's like he hasn't quite adapted to this new environment that he's in yet, but he learns very quickly, and again takes advantage of the underground for the nest, and he uses specific buildings and sewer systems to his advantage. So you see a learning curve with the creature as well as with the humans, as they're kind of trying to figure each other out, and he gets more used to how to target jets and how to avoid guns and missiles and stuff. He gets smart so quickly that by the third act, it's like he's no longer crashing through buildings willy-nilly. He very quickly gets the hang of, like, taking advantage of the buildings to hide and kind of weave around them, like that scene where the helicopters are going after him, and he hides underneath that one, then, like, breaches upward like a great white shark to, like, bite it right out of the sky. That was one of my favorite kills in the movie, in terms of how he, like, outsmarts the military. But and what do you think could have been done better in terms of how could they have designed him in a way that looks more like the original while also giving him more agility and mobility? Because I would think, like, finding the right balance between those two things maybe would have helped the film's reception.
I think really the only thing that they should have done to give it kind of more of that original feel was just put some more weight on him. I mean, for God's sakes, he was slim as a Slim Jim.
He was, yeah.
In that movie, and I get it because, like you said, with the agility, evading people, it was good for that. But, I mean, it didn't feel like I was looking at Godzilla. It just didn't give me that same feel, because going back to what I said when I was, 4 years old going into this movie theater, Dad will tell you it was from the noise why I left this movie early. No, I was sick to my stomach. Mm-hmm. I couldn't even bear to watch the entire movie in the movie theater. It was that bad to me.
Was it making you, like, motion sick, or, like, the noise itself?
No, it was just such a bad film. I mean, that was what I was going through my head as a 4-year-old kid that grew, watched the other ones. But, I mean, really, if they would have added, just a bit more weight, just kind of give them, like, kind of a more chunkier look, not too much. But,
give it more bulk?
Yeah, just kind of more muscle, something like that. It would make me feel like, hey, this is a little bit more like the original Godzilla, while still having that agility, having those abilities that he had in the movie. But, overall, I mean, the design, it just doesn't scream, it doesn't scream intimidating to me or anything like that. I mean,
okay.
In this movie, I do like the fact that, the military, the people actually have to think instead of just outright attack, Zilla.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it just, it was good on that part, but other than that, the movie to me was just so, I mean, it was just...
Yeah. Its biggest weakness really is being a Godzilla film.
Yeah.
At the end of the day. Yeah, one of my favorite sequences in terms of how they try to fight him was the underwater stuff with the submarines and stuff. Because, again, you're talking to someone who's not nearly as well versed in the older films. Most of the fights I remember seeing with him in the older films, with him in the military, were on land, and it's like, I don't know if I saw any sequences of the Navy trying to kill him. I'm sure they did, the whole attempts at submarines trying to take him down, even in the older series. But I feel with this one, they put a lot more time and suspense into it in terms of, him weaving around the subs, and I think at one point he tricks one of the missiles into hitting one of their own vessels. Is it like he gets out of its line of sight at the last second, or he was like luring it towards them. And I just thought, compared to the more repetitive stuff on land, where it's like, okay, we try to shoot at him, he dodges it, we manage to hit him with stuff, he shrugs it off, we try to hit him in the air, we can't hit him, and then he goes back into the water, where again, that's where he's at his most capable. Well, he's still an aquatic creature first and foremost, I believe. And that I thought they were very much faithful to, as far as paying homage to the original, because he doesn't do anything in the water that I wouldn't imagine the original Godzilla couldn't do, even if he's more slender and he swims differently. But it turned almost into like a game of Battleship at that point to me. That's what I would relate it to, as far as what frame of reference I would have had as a little kid, because I remember playing Battleship and how you're trying to find your target and you're trying to hit the other person before they hit you. You sunk my ship or whatever. And this to me is basically like that same dynamic if you consider Godzilla to be the enemy ship, and again, because he's so his cold-bloodedness makes him so hard to track. You're trying to keep him on the radar. You're trying to pinpoint the right moment to launch. And again, you got people in the control room who now they can't even see what's going on because this is all underwater, so they only have the radar to try and keep up with who's moving where. And that's when I got more on the edge of my seat, just like thinking to myself, okay, how's he going to do this? Is he going to swim into like an underground tunnel or something, or are they going to try to chase him into the parts of the island of Manhattan itself that kind of go into underwater tunnels, hills, or caverns maybe? Because I'll tell you right now, my geography and topography are terrible. I don't know how much room a giant lizard like that would actually have to maneuver in the waters around Manhattan. I don't know how much of it is just open water versus what the bottom is like. But I just remember, like, the stuff on land got a little repetitive for me, especially with the older films, because it's like, and again, I understand that series, those older films are a product of their time. Every work of media is, but at a certain point, and this goes back to the criticism of his physicality, like him being too skinny, and whereas the original is like a full-on tank. And I think this is why I didn't watch a lot of the original films growing up after, the first couple or so, because very quickly it got to the point where I'm just like, I could kind of predict how this dance was going to go. Like, you shoot stuff at him, it's not enough, and then either another monster or a new super weapon has to come in to turn the tide. Do you manage to wound him enough that he goes back into the water? The humans manage to save themselves and start reconstruction, and then those poor blue collar workers, it just kind of but it just, the older films to me were a lot more repetitive in that regard of how the battles played out. So I really think that's one thing people don't give this film enough credit for, is how it tried to, at the very least, add more variety to the different more strategy to the different stages of this thing approaching Manhattan, then it gets into the city, then it starts laying its nest down. Like, it gives much more agency to the humans in terms of trying to solve the different problems they come across. Because that's my favorite kind of horror, including in kaiju-related stuff, is problem-solving type horror. Like, there's a clear obstacle, there are established vulnerabilities or openings to do something about the problem. It's just a matter of being smart about what you're going to do. You don't just try to brute force your way through it. And the original films have that too. I'm not saying they don't have thought put into them as far as strategy goes, and the new films do that very well too. But this was the first example I saw of trying to expand on that otherwise pretty standard shoot, kill, break buildings, things, and rinse and repeat for like 80 minutes. What would you say as far as the older films? Which one had the most variety in that regard, as far as how the different players in the game tried to strategize against each other?
Glad you asked that question. Godzilla 1985 with Raymond Burr in it. And this one is probably one of my favorite Godzilla movies because it kind of has the same strategy as the Godzilla 1998 or Zilla. So in Godzilla 1985, like you were saying, just kind of repeat. Tanks come out, shoot him repeatedly. They even threw in something called the Super X, which was this high power, just looked like UFO type thing. They had a team of 5 people in this flying device going and trying to kill Godzilla with like super beams, all sorts of different type of weapons, rockets.
I think I remember that. Yeah. Now, God, I thought that was aliens. That was a military thing?
Yeah.
Ah.
And so, when they did this, the funny part was they thought that they had killed Godzilla by shooting in the mouth with one of the rockets. They would distract it with like some kind of flare that would go up in the sky, and Godzilla would open its mouth, roar, which great strategy. But they were trying to shoot inside his body, try to kill him from doing that.
Right.
Well, ended up, we all know how it goes. He gets knocked out for a little bit, then some supernatural storm comes, lightning bolt goes and hits him, and he wakes up. Guess what? He's going to kill everyone again, kind of same storyline, but...
Is that how it happened in the older ones? Like, whenever he got weakened? Like, I remember he fed on, like, nuclear radiation, and so, like, that was like, the spinach to his Popeye, but I don't remember lightning strikes, him being able to absorb those.
So it was only in this movie where that happened. There was another time where lightning was played into that with Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla. He's sitting there on the edge of a beach and, lightning striking, and he was doing that so when Mechagodzilla got near him, it would kind of pull him closer to Godzilla so he couldn't escape when he, destroyed Mechagodzilla. He made himself a live magnet to that metal, so... Yeah. But with 1985, there was that lightning strike because all this radiation got into the air. So when that lightning bolt hit him, it woke him up and gave him all the energy. It's pretty much like his health bar went back to 100.
Okay. And that's kind of a common thing with these films, isn't it? Like Godzilla goes down and you think he's down for the count, then some kind of ass pull power up or health recharge comes in. Yeah. It's like, and then he comes back for round 2, and that's when he's going to win. Yep. These fights always seem to go like... At least in the older versions, they always seem to go like boxing matches. Like there's the round 1 where everyone's just testing each other. Round 2, he goes down for a little while, and then it's always the third round at most where he comes in, and for the victory theme starts playing, and he yells for his big dinosaur, Adrian. I'm kind of surprised they never... Did they ever come up with, like, a victory theme for these movies? Like, as soon as, like, a certain musical theme starts playing, like, that's when Godzilla wins, and then you just kind of hear it kind of reprised in, like, every other Godzilla movie?
I've only heard, like, one main theme for Godzilla, and that was it. And it's the same one you hear throughout the whole entire Showa series. If you watch the originals, it goes dun 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 dun. That's the same theme that I've heard over and over again. They even had it in King of the Monsters, and in the Legendary movie when he gets back up and from the radiation, he goes and fights King Ghidorah again. That's when you hear it. It kind of was like a homage to the other Toho movies,
right? I don't remember much about the music. If I listen to it again, it might sound familiar to me. Yeah, like I tend to remember music from movies sometimes more than I remember the movies themselves. It's the same thing with songs. Like I tend to remember the music more than the lyrics or the artist. That's just how I've always been wired. But I don't remember if I liked the Godzilla theme growing up or not. I guess maybe I didn't pay that much attention to it. Because, again, after the 98 film, that was pretty much what shaped my impression of the appeal of the franchise. And then I would try to go back and watch the older ones, and I just couldn't get into it because of the lower budgets and effects and stuff. I didn't have as much of an appreciation for the ingenuity that went into those older effects back then. Now I watch them today, and you look back at all the work that was done with like the miniatures and perspective shots and how much work went into the articulate detail on some of those buildings and the destruction sequences. Is like that's one point of praise again that I have to give the 98 film. it very much was riding on the coattails, I believe, of Independence Day, because I think Independence Day was 96, and so you had this point during the 90s where everyone was trying to create these over-the-top disaster movies, like whether it was monsters, aliens, natural disasters, like you had Armageddon, Deep Impact. It's like everyone was trying to figure out, to basically, what's the best excuse for us to blow a lot of shit up and just like make everything look as apocalyptic and dystopian as we can.
Fuck yeah!
This version of Godzilla was one of my introductions to that, as far as, like, along with Independence Day, just this large-scale citywide destruction, and it really opened my eyes to what was possible with disaster effects, and that's part of the appeal of Godzilla as a character too, is he's like a living force of nature. Or like I think he's at his best personally when he's portrayed to be this amoral thing that only ever helps humanity by nature of circumstance. Like, he doesn't care about humans one way or the other. He's not out. I don't like when they portray him to be evil, like this bloodthirsty monster who's actively out to destroy humanity. Even if you try to do some commentary of, like, he's the result of nature trying to balance itself from all the harm humanity's caused to the planet, or he's like, again, kind of a commentary on, like, the consequence of humanity's arrogance at creating nuclear weapons. I like it better when he's not good, he's not evil, he's literally just an animal who rampages through. He helps or hurts only as much as people who get in his way. And then at the end of the day, he just goes back to his home in the ocean, and it's like, you don't bother him, he usually won't bother you. Like, he doesn't eat people, he doesn't like the taste of people, he literally only ever shows up when he feels threatened by something. Like, he's doing what a predator naturally would to just, defend itself. Like, that's one thing I liked about King of the Monsters is when he shows up, he's stalking Ghidorah. Yeah, like, he senses Ghidorah before the humans figure out even where he is, and it's like every time the humans show up, he's not far behind, because he senses how dangerous this thing is, and it's like a threat to the natural equilibrium of, maybe not just his status as, top of the food chain, but like, he senses how it will disrupt the balance of the planet, or the ecosystems of the other kaiju. Because it turns out he's not even from Earth or something. He's a kaiju from space or whatever. I don't know if that was his lore in the original or not. Most of the monsters' lore I knew nothing about until I started, kind of going back to it to try and make sense of the newer movies. Godzilla versus Kong is where they kind of started going back to, I think, Godzilla's hurting people, we don't know why, we gotta figure out, why he's just going around attacking humans unprovoked, because that's not what he's about. And I like how they make a point of characterizing how that's not what, at least in this newer Legends universe, that's not how this version of him acts. He's not out to he's not out to rule the world. He's not out to destroy humanity. Yeah, he's just this big thing who sometimes he just doesn't know his own size, or he just doesn't give a shit. But what do you think is necessary? Let's take it outside the context of Godzilla. What do you think is necessary for any kaiju film to be successful, at least in terms of doing justice to its premise?
Good question, because, really, out of all the kaiju movies that I've watched, they're all really good to me. There's really not one thing that I really look for in a kaiju movie. I just like seeing, these big monsters just going at it with one another, and, just kind of things that you see in the Godzilla movies. Now, one thing I do like, I'm sorry, I'm kind of going to go back to Godzilla.
No, go ahead.
Some things I kind of like how, if you've seen the movie Shin Godzilla.
I haven't. A lot of people recommend that one, and they say it's the movie that made Godzilla scary again.
Yes, it brought out like something. This is what to me made that movie so great. It paid homage to the original 1954. It just made Godzilla this horrific. And you said you didn't like him being evil. This kind of really brought, fear back into me, because the only two other ones that did it was the original Godzilla in 1985. Just how scary they were, attacking humanity. This one was, it kind of changed the storyline a little bit to where, Godzilla is, touched by radiation in the ocean, something like that. Not the actual nuclear bomb that went off. It was nuclear waste that had gone into the ocean and just made this grotesque, evil Godzilla. And there's an actual, and he mutates. So he starts off like, something completely harmless, like Junior in the Godzilla series, Godzilla's son.
Yeah, I remember that one.
Something completely, just harmless. Well, as he mutates, he gets scarier. Blood's just gushing out of Godzilla, and he turns into this nasty, unbeatable, just something you find out. It was like if Freddy Krueger was Godzilla. This is what Shin Godzilla looks like. And
so it sounds kind of like the Toxic Avenger.
Yeah, I mean, it just opened up, the guy that did this movie had a wild imagination. I can't remember the director's name off the top of my head, but he said, I'm going to make this the most scariest looking creature that anybody's ever seen. And at the end of the movie, Godzilla's final stage, he went through several stages in his mutation. And at the final stage, he had humanoid Godzilla's growing on his tail. His tail actually had another mouth come open.
What?
Yeah, to shoot laser beams, and it was actually like another face of Godzilla. So it brought such a good horror aspect to that. So that just kind of opened up my mind. What would make a good kaiju movie? What would make me really like it? It's stuff, just brand new ideas, stuff like that. Because some things, like Godzilla and Kong, it's kind of like what we talked about earlier, just real repetitive. You see kind of the same thing over and over again. This was awesome. I mean, this actually scared me a little bit when I first watched it.
How do they kill him? I mean, in Shin Godzilla, like, first off, why is he always bleeding? Is it just because his body's like constantly changing?
He's supposed to be in severe pain from the radiation, and it's supposed to be tearing at his body. Blood's going all over Tokyo, and the worst thing is about his blood going all over Tokyo. That's another cool thing that they did was, when his blood goes all over the place, it kind of just starts like deteriorating stuff that whatever touches. So
it corrodes stuff like acid?
Yeah, and there's also like more humanoids that come out from the blood.
Ugh.
Yeah, so I mean, it's like I said, it's pretty much like if you had Freddy Krueger, the way that they designed this Godzilla, it's like if you had Freddy Krueger, mixed with Godzilla. It's just this, grotesque, super just disgusting creature. But
are all his powers based around like a body horror thing? Like, does he vomit blood or something?
No, so it's kind of the same. Like, he still has that beam that he shoots out, the fire breath.
Yeah,
it's purple, and it comes out of his tail too. And then another cool thing that they did was the scales. The scales will shoot the beams too, and it destroys just everything.
I remember the scales like charging up energy for like his atomic breath. I don't think I ever saw them shoot stuff out of them. God, this sounds cool. I need to watch this movie.
Yes.
So we can do like a part 2 to this, so discussing more like the horror related side of kaiju. I don't know of that many horror type kaiju movies. I mean, apart from for me, the scariest kaiju movie I ever saw was Cloverfield, and that was chiefly because of two things. This is the best kaiju film I've ever seen in terms of how it portrays the story from the human's perspective, and it was really smart about how they went about it. So first off, it was found footage, but not like a documentary. It was like ordinary people in the middle of the city when this initially unknown, like, you don't even know what it looks like, you barely get glimpses of it throughout the film. They do show it like full front and center towards the end, which I almost kind of wish they hadn't. But Yeah, and initially, like, nobody knows what it is. We only see bits and pieces of, like, its limb or its tail at points when it smashes a bridge that the characters filming are standing on. And I almost wish they'd made it into an anthology movie instead of following a single group of main characters. Like you could have gotten a mix of footage scrapped together from different people filming different vantage points of it on other devices. But you have these people who were at this party in New York. The monster comes in. There was this awesome shot they made during the film's promotion where it's like the poster, I think, was like nothing but the title, and then you see a photo of New York with, like, I think a trail in the water of this big thing moving toward the city, and the Statue of Liberty was shown with its head torn off. Those are the best kinds of monster movies to me. Are the ones where you don't give away what the monster is going to look like, especially if it's a new property. If it's an existing franchise, and then once you're familiar with what the thing looks like, it's fine. I mean, the Godzilla films lean into that hard for the sequels. I think, and the only surprise in most of the later films was whatever the new monster of the week was going to look like, and even then, like, you watch some of the old trailers for those movies, I think they show off the enemy monsters in a lot of the trailers. Because I guess as Godzilla became more well known, they had to find new things to show people that would get their butts in seats, and I guess just showing footage of Godzilla wasn't enough anymore. But it's like the whole movie is literally just them with one guy filming everything going on, I guess, in case someone else sees it someday. And the main characters make a point of commenting multiple times, like, why are you shooting? Why are you filming this? And it's very much like I've heard military veterans talk about this, like wartime photographers. This is a very real thing that happens. Like, Vietnam photographers have talked about this. Tom Savini, who did a lot of the effects for Romero's Living Dead movies, he drew most of his ideas for the gore effects from the stuff he'd seen in Vietnam. As far as the body horror went, there's a very real mentality that lends itself well to the plausibility of found footage scenarios, where it's like, when you're behind the camera, as long as you're not actively participating in the events or interfering with what's going on, then you get this almost like instinctive feel that I'm an observer, I'm less of a spectator, and almost like a presence, almost like if you think of the omnipresent God in how they characterize him in religion, and how he's just watching over what's going on Earth. The camera kind of makes you feel almost like that, in a way, like you're the narrator of the story. The world is shown to you through this lens, and you're just like, it almost makes you feel untouchable in some sense. I've heard some veterans describe, like, you feel like you're not really there, so what's happening doesn't affect you as much. So maybe there's a sense of security or control behind it. That, I think, lends itself really well to the kaiju genre for what they did here with Cloverfield, because you can see this guy's not a professional filmmaker or anything. He's literally just filming stuff at a party for their friend who's, like, going off to do another job or something, so it's like a happy birthday, getting different people saying, goodbye to him, and, you're such a good friend, best wishes, yada, yada, yada. Yeah, and it really becomes like a coping mechanism for this guy, I think, just to, like, keep himself from breaking down under the sheer terror of this situation that they're in. Like, this is the best kaiju film I've seen in terms of portraying how scary it would be from a little tiny human standpoint to be going up against this gargantuan thing. And you brought up Shin Godzilla, how those little, like, humanoid monsters come out of his blood. This film does something like that too, where the monster comes out of the ocean, and and we see at the very end of the movie this, like, shooting star looking thing falling down into the bay near where the city is. So it's heavily implied or I think canonically confirmed at this point, that was the creature when it first crash landed on Earth, I guess, as a baby. And the creature in the film, the creators have talked about this, it's this humongous thing that we see. It literally is a baby. It's like, I don't know if you ever saw that film in the 80s, like the 50-foot baby who's like, he's just waddling around the city. I felt so bad for him when he shocked himself on that telephone line at one point and he's crying. That's literally what this thing is if you changed it from a human to like a terrifying looking alien. I remember the marketing had this whole campaign around it, it's sort of like what the Blair Witch Project did. There was like a whole website dedicated to showing you bits and pieces of this thing. I think we saw the footage of it crash landing into the ocean before the movie came out, and you had all this cryptic military coded stuff, like even the title Cloverfield. I think that was named after like the code name they gave to the creature or the area that it went through or something. I think it's a lot of military jargon. Yeah, as far as how you describe Shin Godzilla, Cloverfield is the closest thing I've seen to that, capturing that horror aspect in terms of an American movie, like far beyond what 1998's Godzilla did. But the creature has these little parasites that come off of it. I thought they were like little mini versions of the creature, like the big one was the parent and these were babies or something. Turns out they're totally different creatures from like a different ecosystem that I guess kind of... Like, sharks, they have those little fish that'll latch onto them and like feed off. I think these things were something like that, but they fall off of this thing, and you see brief glimpses of footage on like televisions that they're looking at where it's like that they're going after the soldiers and people and such. And I don't want to give everything away that this thing does, because I want us to watch this movie and react to it sometime. But they have this venom in them that, like, if they bite you and infect you with it, it does something to you later on. It's like a delayed reaction. But when you find out what it does to the bite victims, that was the one part of the movie where I almost turned it off, because I was just like, oh fuck, that's such an awful way to go. You talking about the... Do the little humanoid blood creatures in Shin Godzilla have any unique abilities of their own? Do they just like kill people by melting them?
So that's the big question. I'm glad you brought that up. So you don't actually see the humanoids until probably the very end of the movie, where you see them up on Godzilla's tail. You see them growing spikes, but they're like in human form. So you asked me how they killed Shin Godzilla at the end of the movie. They actually never killed him. They were supposed to make a sequel to the movie, and they just kind of scrapped it and, went with a different direction. Instead of having one movie, they're making like several other Godzilla movies. That was Toho's plan. So at the end of the movie, they freeze him, pretty much. They freeze him just in enough time to save Tokyo. But at the end, you'll see him just standing still, and the camera goes up, and you see these humanoid creatures. Well, when I read the backstory to Shin Godzilla, they said that when the blood was dropping and, going all over the city, you would see, like, eyeballs and stuff coming out of the blood, and it was supposed to be the humanoids were supposed to even be inside the blood, going around just killing people. I mean, this was just something that constantly mutated and, regenerated. Had multiple, Godzillas. That's the more of the horror thing behind it. This thing's unstoppable, and it's just going to keep multiplying and multiplying.
Yeah, the way you describe it doesn't even sound like it almost doesn't sound like Godzilla. It sounds like this amalgamation of mutations and like different creatures, just like in a Godzilla shape that like slowly spreads out into like different life forms over time. I gotta watch. You've utterly convinced me. I gotta watch this movie now. Like as soon as we're done with the recording today, I'm gonna look this up. Were they trying to do a cinematic universe out of the kaiju back then, as far as like making different movies that would cross over together over time?
Are you talking about with Shin Godzilla or with?
Whichever. You've told me like the different eras of the series. Like we had Kong versus Godzilla, which was just a straight up crossover between those two. But as far as what they're doing with the new movies now, like building the individual films and then crossing them over time, were they doing that back then, or had they already tried to do that before, making a MonsterVerse?
Yes, they did try doing a MonsterVerse.
Oh, what was the first time they did that?
If you're talking about crossovers between like Godzilla and other kaiju, they had I don't know if you remember. It was kind of like Ultraman. If I remember you saying you weren't too familiar with Ultraman.
I knew of him. I'd seen like bits and pieces, but I think as a little kid I would have confused him with Power Rangers.
Well, Godzilla actually had a movie. It was Ultraman, but Godzilla was in it, and they did a crossover with that. Then there was several other ones I can't really remember off the top of my head. I know there was some with like it wasn't exactly King Kong. Do you know? Kaiju named Konga. It was like two King Kongs.
What like a two-headed gorilla?
No, it was like two gorillas, but it was supposed to be a knockoff and everything. They tried so much to do it and do crossovers, and they had different things and different ideas. But Godzilla, it's sad because Godzilla is really the only one that did multiple crossovers that you would see. Like Jet Jaguar was actually supposed to be like another Ultraman. And for his kind of series of movies, and it did pretty well. I mean, with the crossovers, they did all right, but I mean, there wasn't too many. They tried, and it did eventually fail.
So you'd say these newer films are like the first time that the MonsterVerse has been successful so far, or is this the longest that you've seen it go on?
So the longest I've seen it go on is like today.
Yeah, as far as
modern films,
an interconnected story. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what their plan is for the next one. I think they were planning a sequel to Kong, and then I think the next movie is supposed to go into like the full backstory of like the Titan War, and they're going to do more stuff with the Hollow Earth or whatever. Because I remember in King of the Monsters they teased something about that, like those old cave. It was either King of the Monsters or Godzilla versus Kong, but one of them they did a mid or end credits teaser of like the humans discovering old cave murals or something about the Kaiju War, and I think there may have been like a drawing of some new monster that was going to come into a later film. I don't know if it was Destroya or what. I hope they bring Destroya back, because I always thought he was cool. Like I thought his design was cool. He's the only Kaiju I saw that I looked at. Destroya and Ghidorah were the only Kaiju I looked at where just from their designs alone I immediately thought, oh yeah, I could see this thing beating or potentially killing Godzilla. Like they almost all of them looked intimidating, but it's kind of like when Doomsday first killed Superman, in the comics, it's like they made him look so grotesque and so over the top, like just horrifying thing. And I mean, he was like Hulk on steroids. And you think to yourself, looking at like its eyes and all these spikes growing out of him, and just how horrific he looked, like how you described Shin Godzilla. That was the first Superman villain that really leaned so hard into body horror, while at the same time making him look so absurdly strong that you're just like, yeah, I could see this thing killing Superman. And yes, apart from Destroya and Ghidorah, they all pretty much like they always looked like at minimum they could either the Kaiju always fell into two categories for me. There's the ones that looked like they could put up a fight against Godzilla, like make him have to try, and then there were the fodder ones that only existed for him to just like show off how tough he was, like in 2014's Godzilla when he tail whips one of the Mutos into the building when it starts like flying at him. And the other one puts up more of a fight, but then you got that badass finale with him finally using his atomic breath and just like holding its mouth open like Kong did with the T-Rexes in Peter Jackson's version in the 2005 film, and he just like it cooks this thing from the inside. That I thought was the coolest. That's the coolest way I've ever seen Godzilla finish someone off. The way he kills Ghidorah with like being supercharged into a living nuclear bomb, that was cool. A little bit, but in terms of him like strictly finishing someone off with his own natural abilities, that was the best way I've seen him do it. What did you think about them giving Kong that energy axe or whatever it was? Did he have anything like that in the older films?
No. So that I actually thought was pretty cool because it made it kind of like an even playing field, in the movie in a way. So I did like that. But I mean, really, I wish they did more with Kong in that movie. I think giving him a little bit more abilities. I mean, because he's a gorilla, so I mean,
yeah, well,
you can only do so much.
Well, that's always been the distinction between him and Godzilla. Is like we said before, Godzilla gets all of these crazy, like some of them ass pull power ups in like every other movie, whereas Kong he's literally just a giant gorilla. Yeah, so if he can't make it through with his strength and his agility, then he's pretty much screwed. And I remember people discussing that even before this new Godzilla versus Kong came out. It did, like, everyone was predicting that Kong was going to lose, even if they made him grow like much bigger than he was originally. I think in the standalone films, he was only like 25 feet tall, whereas with the first crossover with Godzilla, they made him so much bigger than he'd been in canon before that point. Then they did the same thing with this new one. In Kong Skull Island, he's like still a teenager or something. Then they make him like skyscraper sized, which is what they would have had to do for him to have any chance against Godzilla at all. He would just step on him if he were his original size. But even then, it's like I do like how they portray Godzilla to have the upper hand throughout the majority of the fight. He like when it's just a contest of strength. It's like Godzilla's got his size, his tail, his spikes, his teeth. Like he freaking bites onto Kong's neck and just like he's manhandling him like a mom dragging her kid by the ear. He's just like ragdolling him all around the city, and it's like Kong is like he spends the first like half of the fight at least like running away from him, like he's trying to jump out of the way of his atomic breath. And you see in some shots it looks like Godzilla's smiling because he knows that he's like dominating the fight. He's like, bitch, you thought you could fuck with me? And then it's only when Mechagodzilla comes in, or no. It's when he gets the axe that, like you said, it starts to get to be a more even playing field. I personally think Godzilla still would have won even with the axe in play. Like if Mechagodzilla hadn't interfered. It gives Kong the ability to, at the very least, counter his energy attacks, like the atomic breath. So I think that makes it more fair, and it is believable that an intelligent giant gorilla could learn how to use a weapon. I wasn't against that. It did very much make me think of Thor with Mjolnir. It's just the equivalent of Kong's lightning hammer. Yeah, and yeah, it was a nice new addition to Kong's lore overall. I don't see why he would need it outside of fighting Godzilla. Yeah, but if they ever decide to bring that element back, or maybe introduce an even better kind of weapon for him to like have as an accessory, I wouldn't complain. And I wouldn't have him use it all the time, like have him like carry it strapped on his back with a giant rope that he made out of vines or something, because to me that would take away from the animalistic side of him. Like at the end of the day, he's supposed to be an animal. He's not Conan the Barbarian or Tarzan. And so I definitely think that it should only ever be a situational weapon, but maybe he could leave it someplace just chopped into the eart. Maybe if he goes back to Skull Island, he could just leave it there, so if he ever needs it again, then he knows where it is. Or just try and find some way to make it so that can't be his go-to. Because otherwise, I think that would make him a little too overpowered.
Yeah.
Unless you introduce a kaiju who's like immune to the axe, or like is tough enough to, take the cut from it. I mean, even then, you could argue that in a way, Godzilla kind of gave that power up to him, or like his ancestor did, because the axe is like made from his ancestor's scales, right? It did, like whoever the older Godzilla was back then. And I think that's a fair compromise for the MonsterVerse going forward. Who's your favorite enemy that Godzilla's fought, as far as the really iconic bad guy monsters?
I'm not going to say King Ghidorah, just because, I mean, if I could choose someone, out of it, it'd be King Ghidorah, because that's always been his main, rival in the movies. If I had to choose a second one, someone that's not, in every single movie, it's going to be Destroyer. Because Destroyer was just, when I saw that, Destroyer actually put up a fight and, in a way, killed Godzilla, killed the original one. So that one to me was one of the more exciting villains that he fought against. Another one would probably be, I wouldn't say Mega Godzilla, but probably Rodan, just because it's something different. I mean, it's simple. It's a just this flying bird or pterodactyl, going around trying to attack Godzilla. And I remember actually one of the movies, it was one of the older ones, Godzilla turned around and they had like a mini Rodan. I can't remember which movie it was from, but he just turns around for 2 seconds with his fire breath and just fries it like fried chicken. It was just funny to me, but...
Has Rodan always been as big as he was portrayed in a King of the Monsters, or did they size him up for that movie?
They definitely sized him up. Rodan was not that big in the original ones. He was probably only half the size of what you see in the King of the Monsters.
Oh. Yeah, because when I first saw him in a King of the Monsters, I thought, holy crap! That thing looks like it could be a main enemy in itself. It was surprising to me that thing couldn't kill King Ghidorah on its own, since it's like it's emanating fire off of it. Could he always do that? Like generate fire around him?
No, so that was something that the newer movies did, the Legendary series. So in the original series, he was literally just a flying pterodactyl bird thing, just flying over city. And the only thing that he really did, he would fly over Tokyo, and then you would just see kind of this wind gust come up from behind wherever he flew over and just, start wiping out buildings. That was pretty much the only attack he had, so
he was like a an air-based kaiju, like the building up strong gusts of wind.
Yeah.
And that he would, send objects and buildings propelling, wherever his wings were, like, flapping.
Yeah. That's why Rodan's main rival was pretty much Mothra. I mean, those two in the original movies used to fight each other all the time, and then they kind of paid homage to that in King of the Monsters when those two were going at it.
Yeah.
So it was pretty neat. I mean, what the Legendary films did with Rodan, I was actually pretty impressed, increasing the size, giving him some kind of ability,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the only other movie I've seen in terms of making kaiju look as intimidating as what you described with a Destroya or Shin Godzilla. Like these kaiju wouldn't be as scary as Shin Godzilla. Yeah, but Pacific Rim, which came out in 2013, I thought did a really good job of selling how imposing kaiju are, even from a standpoint of when you get to the scale of something that could fight them. Like the whole premise of Pacific Rim is basically, and this is where the title of the movie comes from, this crevice, some kind of portal opens up at the bottom of the Pacific. Again, that's the rim that these interdimensional creatures. There's like in this movie, the kaiju don't just exist. They were genetically engineered by this alien race who would use them to try to take over Earth. So they start sending these kaiju through the portal. They would come out of the ocean to different cities around the world. And you had different classes of them. They're categorized like hurricanes, like Category 1 through 5. The Category 5, which is the first one they've ever seen, doesn't come in until the very end of the movie, I believe. If for the first few years, these things are just like wrecking the planet, and no human weaponry, including nukes, was strong enough to do anything against them. So eventually, humanity kind of came together and pulled their different militaries' resources together to create giant robots to fight them. Like that's literally the hook of the movie. It's literally giant robots, beating up giant monsters, just pretty much like Power Rangers, just a mecha meets kaiju action. And they call these things Jaegers. It's like, did you ever hear of a Neon Genesis Evangelion?
No.
And it's a really iconic mecha anime that follows a very similar premise, where they build like giant robots to fight these things called angels. Those that like they come to Earth one at a time, and like each angel has different abilities. They get progressively bigger and stronger, and the Evangelion units they're sort of like Gundams in that you have human pilots inside of them that kind of, and the big suits kind of mimic their actions, and for whatever reason, in the universe of Evangelion, only specific people with like specific brain types or something can use them. It's a very specific type of neural makeup that you have to have. And again, for whatever reason, all the people that can pilot these things or have the right brain chemistry to do it are kids, because, of course, it's anime. The protagonist almost always has to be a teenager, because that's relatable. Child soldiers for the win. I mean, granted, child soldiers have been a thing in fiction throughout human history. That's nothing new. But it's a very interesting case in that it starts off as kind of a mecha versus kaiju type story, but then it turns into a more psychological, very dark at points, existentialism, type of mindfuck kind of story where you really get into the trauma of what these different kids are going through, especially the main character. You feel so sorry for him. He's basically the Frodo Baggins of this series. It just sucks to be him. And he kind of gets not so much forced, but strong-armed into this position of having to train to use these Evangelion suit that only the suit he uses only responds to him or works best with him for whatever reason, and he has to kind of figure out how to master using it as different pilots come in, and he develops relationships with different pilots. One of them, I think he develops a crush on. Another starts out as his rival, but they become friends over time. It's the best kaiju-related story I've seen in terms of selling the terror of what it would like to be a human having to bear the responsibility of going up against these things, and in this incredibly powerful suit. And Pacific Rim very much mirrors that sense of the burden that comes with, if you die, then that's one less pilot that humanity has to defend itself. And for a while in Pacific Rim, the pilots are dropping like flies. Almost all the Jaegers have been destroyed. They only have one left from the older series of them. And they build a couple new ones, I think, to try to team up with it against these newer, increasingly stronger waves of kaiju. And the way they go about the way they work in Pacific Rim is unique too, in that each of the Jaegers requires two humans to pilot it, because I guess it takes more than one mind to control all the mechanisms quickly enough and fluidly enough to keep up with how fast the kaiju can move for their size. Because they really go the extra mile of making these Jaegers feel believable as they have mechanical problems, they break down, they jam, and you were talking about how you wished 1998's Godzilla had more weight given to him. Every time there's a fight in this movie, and these things hit each other, you feel the weight of it. Every impact is its own little destructive sequence, almost. There's my favorite shot is one where the Jaeger, I think, misses a punch and it goes into this giant fist goes into a building. I don't know if any of this was practical or not. Some of the effects were practical, and you see this enormous fist just wrecking through office cubicles until it finally slows down enough to not punch through the whole frickin' building. And those little metal ball things some people have on their desks, you kind of pick one up and it starts knocking the other back and forth. It's a little kind of cool physics thing. The fist slows down right as it barely touches this little tiny metal ball thing, and it starts doing that back and forth. That I thought was a nice touch, just to it's one of the best movies, if not the best movie I've seen in terms of selling the weight and scale of these things, and the pilots get just enough development that you really feel for them. They're not super in-depth characters. They serve the purpose of the kind of movie this is. But it's pretty well paced overall too. It doesn't really waste any time getting into the action, and when it focuses on the humans and their little drama, that there's just enough time spent on it that you feel like it serves a purpose. It's not just there to pad out the runtime. Now I'm curious, what was the best kaiju film you saw in terms of the human storylines? Because in the older movies, I gotta be honest, I did not, like, before I saw the 1998 Godzilla, I did not give a flying fuck about the humans or anything that they were doing. Like, even the scientific stuff, some of it was because that stuff went over my head as a little kid, but even when I was old enough to understand it, I like, in the back of my mind, I was always like, just get back to the monsters so we can end this already. Just kill everybody else. Like, I would have been perfectly fine with, like, 90 minutes of nothing but the monsters fighting each other back then. Now I understand that you know, that wouldn't be very successful for, you know, keeping audiences interested. You know, you gotta have some sense of storyline to it, but it's just like, especially in the original Godzilla, I remember bits and pieces of them, you know, talking about how are we going to deal with him, and then you have that prayer for peace song at the very end, which was, I'm sorry, hilarious to me. Like, even when I listen to it today, it's like, they try and make it this big emotional moment, and I'm just sitting here, like, struggling not to laugh, because I'm just like, dude, this is a fucking monster movie. Like, when the heck did this turn into, like, an existential plea for humanity's salvation? It's just, I get what they were trying to do, but it's like, for me personally, it just didn't resonate with me at all. Like, I just kept saying, "Things, shut up, stop singing, just get back to the monster, please."
If I had to choose, because I'm kind of like you, when I watch these kaiju movies, I'm more into the monsters. I'm not really paying attention to the human aspect of it. But if I had to choose, I'd agree a little bit with the 98 Godzilla, and then I would also say Gamera. Because Gamera focuses on, you know, protecting kids, and, you know, the children look up to Gamera as their superhero. Mm-hmm. So, in that way, I would have to say, you know, those two are pretty good with the human aspect of it, but still, just to me, I fully agree with you. When it comes to kaiju movies, I don't really pay attention to that aspect. I pay attention to, like, I want to see monsters fight. I want to see, you know, this creature come out and destroy stuff. That's what I'm paying to watch this movie. I want to see the monster. I don't want to sit here and see people that I see every single day. You know, You know, I want to see these monsters go at it. So
see, that's another thing I liked about the American film, is that it made me actually care about the human characters for the first time. Not just because, you know, I could, you know, get immersed in the dialogue without hearing, like, these god-awful English dubs. It would not syncing up at all with the Japanese actors. But just from a human standpoint, it made the characters more relatable to me. Like Matthew Broderick's character, you know, Nick Totopoulos. Yeah. So, you know, he was named after Patrick Totopoulos, who worked on that movie. He was I believe he was the head of the effects for 98's Godzilla.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he did a lot of work on that film. And you remember the Sci-Fi Channel series Face Off, the makeup competition?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was one of the judges on that show for the first few seasons. But Godzilla was really what he was known for, and in the American movie, Nick Totopoulos is essentially that film's equivalent to Daisuke Serizawa, whoever this. Like, they rename him for the new Legendary films, but he keeps the last name Serizawa, I believe. Whoever the main scientist character is that you look for in the older Godzilla films, that's basically Matthew Broderick's character, and Matthew Broderick's one of those actors that either you love him or you absolutely can't stand him. Mm-hmm. There seems to be no middle ground when it comes to how people think of him. Some people find him just grating to watch or listen to. It's like my favorite thing he's ever done is always going to be Ferris Bueller's Day Off. But I liked him in this movie too. You know, I thought he was relatable. You know, he was nerdy. He was kind of down to earth. You know, he works with earthworms. His occupation of studying how radiation affected them made perfect sense to me for why they would bring him on for his expertise and trying to study this new thing, even though he quickly discovers just how out of his depth he is like that imagery of him standing inside the footprint, and then he goes up to the colonel like, there's no creature in the world that makes footprints like that, is there? and then the redhead, who she was so hot, I always loved her and Maria Patillo, whoever it is that plays Audrey.
Flawless pronunciation.
Those are two of my early celebrity crushes.
Same.
She still looks so good. I think she's like 57 now. She looks like she's barely aged. But Yeah, she was one of my first blonde celebrity crushes. Like Britney Spears was my first in general, so she'd be the first blonde. But yeah, I would have been pissed if Maria Patillo left me to go to New York too. Yeah, but I thought her love story with Matthew Broderick was sweet. Yes, it was very sitcom-y, very will they, won't they, kind of Ross and Rachel type stuff. Like again, it's a Hollywood movie. It's very 90s, but I thought that worked. And they weren't so cliche that I couldn't get into them. As far as the supporting characters go, like, I loved Hank Azaria so much in this movie, and this was before I knew the voice that he did on The Simpsons. Like, this was my introduction to him before I even got into watching The Simpsons. I just love how he sells the New Yorker accent so hard, and his wife Lucy would. God, what was her? Arabella Field. I loved her so much as like his hardcore. They're like, I'll kick the shit out of you if you piss me off. kind of Brooklyn or Bronx wife, whatever part of New York she was from. Nancy Cartwright, I think, is the lady who played the redhead.
It's Vicky Lewis, you dumb fuck.
It's a very good ensemble cast. You got Vicky Lewis, Kevin Dunn. Like, Kevin Dunn plays the Colonel. He's another one of those character actors I've seen in so many movies, and he always seems to play that asshole character who's like, he's either the asshole you love to hate or the kind of likable asshole, like he's got an attitude, but you kind of endear to him just because you understand where he's coming from. I thought he was the perfect choice to play the main military dude, kind of leading the command in this movie. And you had Michael Lerner as the mayor, he was like the real life Peter Griffin for me before the real life Peter Griffin who's currently doing it on YouTube. But yeah, like if he'd been like a few years younger, I would have say they should have done a live action Family Guy movie with him. He even kind of sounds like Peter, doesn't he? He's got a similar voice. Yeah, I just thought it was a fun ensemble cast, and Jean Reno, I've always loved him. Like, he's what you're gonna get from him pretty much every movie he's in, and he's a very famous French actor. I think he's more popular in France than in America, but yeah, I mean, even for the little that he has to do in this movie, I thought they justified his inclusion enough, and I liked how they changed it from the nuclear testing being done in Japan to France this time. Like, I was very happy they didn't go what would have been such a more cliched route of having it be America's fault. It's like, fuck yeah! Seems like every other disaster-related movie, it either takes place solely in America or it's caused by something that the Americans do. So it's nice to kind of, again, go back to that sort of Cold War era where it's like, you had multiple countries kind of playing into the arms race of nuclear testing, and everyone trying to basically turn into a nuclear dick measuring contest of everyone trying to stack up enough so that if World War III ever breaks out, America won't be solely in the lead. And it made sense as a way to justify Godzilla's mutation. I thought his backstory in this one was pretty faithful to the original films that treated him as like a product of nuclear mutation. I don't think they strayed too far from that. They just changed the presentation of it in terms of how they built him up. Like the first act when he's attacking those Japanese ships and you see like the giant claw marks and you hear that iconic roar, but you don't see him when it's storming out at sea. And even that super corny scene where John Reno's like popping the lighter open, for some reason that's what causes this catatonic man to respond, and I still don't know exactly why they did that.
What did you see, old man?
Godzilla.
And it's just like that to me was like, okay, like I'm hooked. You've got me interested now. Where's this going? But it's also definitely my favorite Godzilla movie in terms of the nest subplot. I thought that subplot was boring as shit when they did it in other Godzilla movies. Like, even the 2014 one, I did not care about the Muto nest at all. Well, and granted, I acknowledge one reason I probably like this version of it is because it blatantly rips off Jurassic Park, and I've always loved Jurassic Park. Like, you even look at the designs for the baby Godzillas, they're quite obviously pretty much taken directly from the Raptors. But I really liked how they built up the subplot of trying to figure out where the nest is. Nick's character is the first one to figure out that this thing's going to lay eggs, but the military doesn't believe him at first. And it's understandable why they want to prioritize taking on the big Godzilla. They don't want to divert resources based on a theory with no evidence. And so, but by the time it gets around to the third act, and you get to them going into Madison Square Garden and like seeing all these eggs, it turns almost into a different movie at that point for a little bit. It was the perfect way to justify knocking Godzilla out of the plot for a little bit when he takes those submarine missiles under the water and you think they've killed him. Because then it kind of turns into, well, we got to prevent all these hundreds of other Godzillas from coming in. And when they destroy the nest at the end with that nail biting, like, we got to get out of here before it blows up, even though you know that the shockwave alone would have absolutely liquefied their organs if they were that close when those explosives went off. And you think, oh, okay, we did it, it's finally over. And then the big one comes back. Like, I didn't see that coming the first time I saw it. So then it's like, you know, he comes in, he sees his babies are all dead, and he looks right at the humans who he knows are responsible. I guess he can, like, smell it on them. And Matthew Broderick's just like, he looks angry. Like, as a little kid in the theater, that was when I was just like, oh, shit. And then that big chase through the city starts. Again, it's not a good Godzilla movie, but I will defy anyone to explain to me why this is not a good kaiju movie. Just if again, had it been standalone, because like every act of this film just kept me hooked in different ways for different reasons. So, last thing I'll ask you is, apart from this, if we set this as the bar for the worst Godzilla film, what's the worst film you saw from the older series? He said that, or the one that you've rewatched the least.
If I had to pick the worst one from the older one, it would definitely be Son of Godzilla. Oh,
I knew you were going to say that. That's exactly what I was thinking in my bed.
It was like I was either going to choose that one or Godzilla's Revenge, just one of the two, because it was dumb, because I swear I'm talking about the right one. So Son of Godzilla is the one where that kid is imagining being in Monster Island.
Oh my god.
I think, and then Gabera or whatever the other monster evil guy is supposed to represent the bully. I just watched that and I was like, who was dropping acid, making this movie? And I don't even remember watching it about a year or two ago on Svengoolie. He's a horror movie spoof guy. Comes on MeTV.
I think I've heard of him.
He said that this movie was so bad, Keith. Throughout the whole movie, it was a 90-minute movie. He had to fill in most of the parts because he got so bored with the movie. He spoofed majority of the movie even while the characters were talking. That's how bad this movie was. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that's definitely like a close second. I mean, I might actually like the 98 Godzilla movie just a little bit more than that movie. I mean, that was how bad it was.
At least it didn't have that junior Godzilla looking like something out of that. Did you ever see that old, I don't know if it was the 80s or the early 90s maybe, they had this TV series about these like anthropomorphic dinosaurs living in prehistoric times, and they wore clothes, they talked like humans, that they had these like they were either puppets. I think they were either puppets or guys in suits. Yeah, but
you're talking about dinosaurs.
Yeah.
The show's literally called Dinosaurs.
Yeah. That's what Godzilla Jr. looked like to me. He looked like the baby from that series Dinosaurs, and he just those eyeballs just made him look so goofy. Even by the standards of those suits back then, that was probably one of the lamest looking suits I'd seen. It looked like something out of like I don't know, Barney almost. Interesting. But I just remember I did not give one iota of a shit about that movie at all. Like, especially the scenes where it was kind of cute when you see him, like, playing around on, like, Godzilla's tail, and it's like, Godzilla's just trying to get some rest or something. It's like almost every interaction he has with this kid, it's like, God, please, something just fucking kill this thing so I don't have to deal with it. Like, I may be misremembering, I do not recall Godzilla being a caring parent, generally. The only time I remember him defending his kid is when he's in, like, danger of dying or something.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I think he just leaves him alone for the most part.
I remember Godzilla just straight abused him. He sat there, he was trying to teach him the fire breath, and he goes and stomps on Minya's tail, and Minya goes,
It's like when Piccolo starts training Gohan it very early into Dragon Ball Z.
I remember that. Piccolo was jackass towards him. That's a good comparison. I mean, you're right. That's exactly how Godzilla treated his son, was just like how Piccolo treated Gohan.
And it's also when Gohan was the most annoying thing, depending on who you ask, so it fits even better.
Yeah, exactly.
I just remember every time Junior, like, made that sound, like, it's just, God, I feel so bad for whoever's credited as doing the voice of that character, because he must have, his or her career, it could have been a woman, just, that was one of the most annoying. It sounded like the worst toddler tantrum you've ever heard with a human baby. If you dialed up the pitch even further, made it sound like a chain smoker, and then just, oh my God, I wanted to. As a kid, I wanted to turn the movie off almost every time he started, like, whining, because it's just like. It's like, again, I get what they were going for, but at the end of the day, it's like, who the fuck goes to a Godzilla film to watch this? Like, who asked for this kind of story? If they had kept Junior's screen time to a minimum, fast-forwarded to when he was older, and then set him up to take over as the new main Godzilla, like, killed the parent off in the same film, that, I think, would have justified the premise a little more, but the fact that he stays Junior for just so much of the movie, I'm just like, is there anything in that movie as far as the continuity goes that you have to pay attention to in line with the other?
No, that's the part. It was just some random, like, 60s, I swear, druggy movie. That's not by me.
Thank Jesus.
Yeah, it was just such an odd movie. Like, I swear, like, in the beginning of the movie when the intros are, coming on, you hear, like, these Mongolian chanting music. Like, I showed it to Mackie one time, and her mom was like, or Mackie was like, this is the music that I think my mom listened to back, like, in her hippie days. Like, what is this? It sounds like Mongolian war chants or something going on.
Yeah, was it like throat singing or something like that? That really deep. Oh,
yeah,
is that what?
That's what it was.
They use that in so many movies to try and make something like. I think they used that in Indiana Jones at one point, like the Temple of Doom or whatever. And I almost never find it appropriate for that music to be used, even for thematic effect, because I'm just like, it takes me out of the movie like 9 times out of 10, because I'm just like, of all the sounds you could pick to accentuate the moment, like why this? Why that? For a Godzilla movie, and even when it makes sense, like for a King Kong movie, maybe it would be more appropriate. They did something kind of a chanting similar to that in the 2005 King Kong, when the natives are like singing as he's coming to look at Naomi Watts, who's intended to be the human sacrifice. He's another early celebrity crush, beautiful blonde. And but I like her more than Jessica Lange personally. Like, but either one. And, but I'm not picky. But yeah, I just, some of the musical choices they go with for these monster movies, I listen to them and I'm like, Mighty Joe Young, the whole score for that movie, not technically a kaiju movie. He's not even as big as King Kong, I don't think. But Mighty Joe Young, I thought, had a very good score. And you really feel what each scene is meant to make you feel. Like, I would have loved to see a Godzilla movie done by John Williams. Like, if he ever worked on the soundtrack for one of those, it was like, I definitely wouldn't mind that. Yeah. I think he's retiring now after the fifth Indiana Jones movie that just came out.
Really?
I think he said that was going to be his final score that he's done. He's worked in the industry for over 50 years. You realize that?
Wow, that's impressive.
That's incredible. And that is going to do it for this episode of Horror Convos. Comment below, what were your favorite kaiju media growing up? What, in your opinion, makes a quality kaiju story? What makes a well-executed, scary giant monster fiction? Don't be shy with your takes. Remember, this is more than a podcast. It is a dialogue between horror lovers. Here is your regular reminder that Horror Convos is available to listen to on YouTube, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and ad-free on Patreon. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss when our newest content is uploaded. Good night, be well, until we talk again.